Good afternoon, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen in the gallery. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request of any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or by calling 519-661-2489, extension 2425. As a notice to all, council will break for dinner at approximately 6:30 p.m. Unless we finish at 5:15 sharp. So noting that, I will ask for our pardon me? I'm not going to ask for that. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenge of being so organized is that you look for your notes, and here we are. We're delighted today, actually, to have someone with us to join us in leading us in our national anthem. It's my honor to introduce Tanya Lovell. Tanya is a local blues musician with a background in country music and has performed all across Canada. She currently performs with bands London Funk Express, Double Clutch Band, and Uptown Affair. She's also the host of Western University's CHRW Blues radio program, as well as Blues on a Sunday Jam. Please help me welcome Tanya as we ask ourselves to stand and join her in the national anthem. Tanya.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us commands. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Colleagues, I'll ask you to be seated and just bear with me a moment, please. Colleagues, I'm presenting it's a new tradition. You're the first recipient of our tradition, which is a certificate to acknowledge Tanya Lovell as our singer of our national anthem. Once again, please join me in congratulating Tanya on a great job. Thank you so much. Absolutely. I've just made a commitment to Councillor Morgan that if he sings, he gets a certificate too, duly signed, notarized, and authorized. By the way, I haven't sung that low since Johnny Cash's daddy sang bass, so there we have. I will ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Councillor Turner.
Your Worship, with respect to the 8th and 9th report of Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee, I wish to declare a pecuniary interest on let me read this right. Item 4.1, investing in Canada infrastructure, public transport, transit stream transportation project specific to the Wellington Road Gateway project. As I own a property within 500 meters, the proposed rapid transit stop.
So noted, thank you. Any other disclosures? Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two matters. First, 8.3, number 16, as I am an LDBA member, I will recuse myself on that vote. I'd like to speak to item number 9.2 regarding the north leg of BRT. Last night, I acted upon advice given by the Integrity Commissioner. I've heard in this chamber conflicting opinions. Some say business will gain with BRT and Richmond. Some say the opposite. I believe I will have no financial gain or loss regardless of the vote. However, upon further reflection and further discussions with individuals who have expertise in these matters, I cannot predict the future with absolute certainty. So I will take the cautious approach and recuse myself from this vote.
So noted, thank you. Any other disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, Councillor Morgan. The singer.
Can't sing without a microphone. I have two disclosures of interest tonight from the added SPPC report from last night. It was item 4.1 in the report, the Investing in Canada program, specifically transit project number 4, the North Connection. The North Connection transit project has a direct financial impact on my employer, Western University. So I will declare on that matter. And also, based on advice from the Integrity Commissioner, as well as the wording in the draft motion and comments in the media, the emergent motion that is on the agenda related to the Medical Innovation and Commercialization Network. Elements of this motion could involve the recovery of funds or interest earned that have a financial impact on my employer, Western University, and so I'll declare conflict on that based on my advice from the Integrity Commissioner.
So noted. Any other declarations? Councillor Helmer.
On the same matters that Councillor Morgan has declared, I will declare on the 8th report of SPPC 9.2.2 as it pertains to project number 4, the North Connection, as I'm employed by Western University. And also the 9th report of SPPC 9.4.1, the same project, project number 4. If there's any discussions about that, I'll recuse myself from that as I have a conflict because my employer is Western University. I'm not sure I agree with my colleague on the issue of the emergent motion. I'm going to have to make up my mind once I actually see what the motion is and what it might mean for Western University.
So noted. Any other declarations? Thank you, colleagues. Seeing none, I'm not aware of any recognitions this evening, notwithstanding Councillor Morgan's wish to sing. Therefore, I will refer us to the review of the confidential matters to be considered in public, and I'm not aware of any. I will look for a motion to move into closed session. Councillor Pelosa, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Any comments or questions as I turn your attention to the screen, please?
And for the record, these are the reasons that are published on the public agenda. There are 7 reasons. Councillor Sally? Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Colleagues, we'll move to committee room 3, please. like to recognize Councillor Morgan, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the start of the meeting, I declared a couple of conflicts, then I came to realize that I missed one, which is the 8th report of the SPPC committee. This was the public participation meeting, item 3.1, which is also related to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. My conflict is only on transit project number 4, the North Connection. The North Connection Transit Project has a direct financial impact on my employer, Western University, so I'll declare on that piece as well.
So noted. Thanks very much. Colleagues, I'll turn your attention to number 5 of the agenda, the minutes. I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes of March 5. Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Comments or questions? In which case, I'll call the question and turn your attention to the screen, please.
Councillor Van Holst, Councillor Lewis. Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Communications and petitions. I'd note there are a number of communications on the agenda and added agenda. So I'll look for a motion to receive the communications and refer them to be considered with the item that they're related to. Moved by Councillor Van Meerbergen, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any comments or questions? In which case, I'll call the question. Turn your attention to the screen, please.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14-0.
Thank you very much. There are no motions to which notice is given, so I will turn your attention to the reports. 8.1, the 6th report of the Planning Environment Committee. Councillor Hopkins, please.
Yes, Your Worship, I'm very happy to put the 6th meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee report on the floor. I can't believe it is 6 meetings already. I have had a request to pull number 21, which is 5.3, 195 Dundas Street. I've not heard from any of my colleagues for any other items to be pulled, so I will be putting the rest of the report on the floor. I do want to just make a few comments, if I may. I think it was a good evening for heritage. There were 3 properties that retained the heritage designation at 429 William Street. Gray Street was designated. That's the London Fugitive Slave Chapel. We know the chapel has been moved and it is designated, but the property was not. So we did that at planning. And the last designation, even though we approved the removal of the barn, the one at 1588 Clark, the homestead, would retain its heritage designation. We received a couple presentations, State of the Downtown report, as well as the Dingman Creek subwatershed screening area mapping update. There's information there for you. I hope my colleagues have received that report. It was, it's good information to have. Moving forward, if I may, putting on my Ward 9 hat, I did not have an opportunity to thank staff regarding the draft Lambeth area improvement plan. And I do, through you, Your Worship, want to thank Mr. Fleming in particular for his dedication to implementing the Lambeth Community Improvement Plan. It took us a number of years. Each community improvement plan looks a little bit different, and I know he encouraged me to stick with it, to go through the process and to work with the community. I also, Your Worship, want to ask Mr. Fleming, make sure you pass on my thanks to your staff who did an amazing job. We had a follow-up community meeting last week as well. We had over 60 people discussing the community improvement plan, and I just really want to thank you. So with that, I would like to put, I see no questions. I'd like to put the rest of the report on the floor.
Any questions with the exception of 5.3? Thank you. Then I will turn your attention.
Councillor Turner?
Oh, pardon me, Councillor. You're not waving enough. You have to use two hands. Sorry, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I must have been in your peripheral. Just with respect to number, sorry, let me get this right. I had it there. The state of the city, sorry, the state of the downtown report, which is number 12, thank you. I just wanted to highlight some of the stuff that came out of that report, and it's a very important and significant report we get every 2 years, this one for 2017. So this highlighted significant work of public and private investment, especially downtown London, who've done an amazing job in being able to leverage a lot of the funding that we've put in. In fact, we've seen about a 17-to-1 leveraging of public dollars in the investment in downtown. So that's about $100 million in public investment over the course of projects such as the Millennium Plan. And those projects have shown that with respect to the retail vacancy, those rates were kept quite low and inconsistent, or they've been consistent with industry standards of what vacancy rates should be. In downtown alone, there was a 75% population increase over the past 20 years. The city at large grew about 25%. So the rate of population downtown was threefold what the city's population increase was in general. This really demonstrates that the embers that are burning downtown have been fanned quite well, and the work that we've been doing with the community, with industry, and with the city has been quite effective. The proportion of assessment value remained constant while the city grew. So if your city grows, and the downtown stays the same size, its proportion would decrease relative to the city's total value of assessment, but it actually remained constant, which showed that overall its value grew over time. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight in this was the report does talk about the impact of our commercial office policies and our need to uphold those. Just the movements of some small to medium-sized offices such as Good Life and Sifton out of the core, outside of the downtown area, did change and have a fair impact on the downtown vacancy rate with respect to commercial office vacancy. So we have policies in place in our official plan that talk about not permitting large commercial office growth outside of the core. This is a good illustration of why that's important. So I wanted to highlight those pieces from the report because I think that's important for us to know as council and also for the city to know as we go forward and continue to take a look at the investments and strategic projects that are listed in the downtown master plan are moved forward.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. He's also acknowledged that you need two hands to be raised and waved, and I'll recognize you. Councillor Van Holst, I think you had a comment.
Thank you,
With one
Your
hand.
Worship, and through you, I'll just acknowledge Councillor Hopkins for her determination to see through the community improvement plan. I know she has a great passion for that, and it was delayed a little bit when that was first brought out, quite a number, 4 years ago perhaps. But so congratulations on the work that's happening on that.
Thank you. Other comments or questions for staff or for Councillor Hopkins? Thank you. Then I'll call the question. Turn your attention to the screen, please.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, I'd like to put 21, 5.3, 195 Dundas Street on the floor. Councillor Turner did pull this. I do want to let my colleagues know that this was a delegation request that we did receive at planning. We also received a report from Latch as well regarding the heritage alteration permit and as you can see, approved the alteration permit.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Turner, I see you.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to this, I asked for it to be pulled during committee. We had a good discussion about this. The London Advisory Committee on Heritage had requested that this be deferred, the heritage alteration permit being granted, as a result of them wanting to take a look at the heritage impact assessment for this property. The 195 Dundas sits on this block on the south side of Dundas Street between Richmond and Clarence. Right now, it's set back, or proposed to be set back from the road. Right now, there's a little parking lot and a bit of a pocket park of sorts, and it's a bit of a gap in the streetscape. And I think that was the concern of the London Advisory Committee on Heritage, that hadn't been considered in the design process for what was being put forward. The proponent came forward and asked and said that they wanted to take advantage of coupling with the Dundas Place construction so that they could tie in with utilities at that time and do it in a coordinated manner, and that's why the timing was important to them. As we went through the discussion, I was kind of on the fence through it. I voted in favor of granting the heritage alteration permit at the time. In retrospect, the timing and the timing pressures were not of our making. Those were pressures as of the applicant. I think the request of Latch was appropriate, and so I just wanted to explain why I'm going to change my vote on this one.
So noted. Thank you. Other comments or questions? Seeing none, then I will call the vote and turn your attention to the screen, please.
Councillor Cabot. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14-1.
Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. I appreciate that. 8.2 on our agenda, the fourth report of the Community and Protective Services Committee. Councillor Cassidy, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and our meeting was brisk and efficient, and I think we were finished in 20 minutes, so I have not heard from any of my colleagues. I'll put the entire report on the floor.
I suspect you're just trying to beat Councillor Squire's timing on such things, but we'll see. Anyone looking for any items to be withdrawn? Any comments then questions? So moved. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and just to assist Councillor Cassidy, I believe it was 18 minutes that we finished our meeting in. That being said, I just wanted to draw my colleagues' attention to, I'm sorry, my screen has scrolled down here, to the request for dedication of Fire Station number 4 at 870 Colburn Street in memory of Deputy Chief W. Peter Harding. This was something that we had both former firefighter and food bank director Glenn Pearson here for, as well as Randy Warden from St. John's Ambulance and Chief Hamer here from the fire department to encourage our support for this. And I've heard from a number of folks in the firefighters community how appreciative they are of this. I'm sure that council will support this unanimously, but it's a very important thing that we're able to honor people who protect and serve our community in these ways through these acknowledgements when the opportunity arises. So I just wanted to draw council's attention to that and encourage their support.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, Councillor Lehman.
I'll need to have 4.1 pulled. No? Oh, sorry. Ignore that.
Any other comments or questions? we'd like to do a wrap then, Councillor Cassidy.
I just want to say that that will be my report, Your Worship, but I also wanted to mention we continue our investment in the arts. This council does, and was pleased to see the launch of the new season of the Grand this morning, see that announcement, and see how the Grand and the London Arts Council use the money that the city provides to them to leverage additional investment and do really good things for our communities. With that, I put the entire report on the floor.
Thank you very much, and as we call the question, I'm sure it's a total coincidence that Ms. Harvey of the Grand Theatre is in the gallery. I'm sure it's totally that way. Colleagues, we'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. 8.3, the seventh report of the Corporate Services Committee. May I call upon Councillor Morgan, please?
Thank you, Chair. The item that we need to deal with separately is item 16, which is 4.1, the Downtown Business Association Improvement Area. The committee was unable to reach a majority decision, and so that decision has been put to council. I've circulated a motion on that, but so that one will be dealt with separately. The remaining items, 1 through 15 and 17 to 19, I'm not aware if colleagues would like to deal with any of them separately, so I would like to hear that now.
We may have a couple. Councillor Pelosa?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was requesting 2.6 to be pulled for amendment to it.
Councillor Turner?
2.1 and 2.3 referenced as 2 and 12 on the council agenda.
Anything else, colleagues? Councillor Hopkins?
I just have a comment on number 13, 2.4. It doesn't have to be
a comment or as an exclusion? Do you want it withdrawn and discussed separately?
No,
or?
just a comment.
Okay, we'll do that. Certainly be welcome to comment as we proceed with the report. Any other items to be? Councillor Helmer?
2.4, which I voted against that committee and would like to vote on separately.
Any other items to be pulled? Councillor Morgan?
Okay, so if I'm correct, I think what we have left is 1. I'm going by the council numbering, just so you know. 1, 3 through 11, 15, 17 through 19 is what remains. So I'm happy to put those on the floor.
Those are on the floor. Are there, just to be clear, because there were a number of items that were pulled, is there anything else that needs to be pulled before we open that up for discussion? Thank you. I think, Councillor Hopkins, you might have had a comment?
Oh, no. The one that Councillor Hopkins wanted a comment on, Councillor Helmer actually wanted to vote on separately.
So noted. Okay. Then any other comments with respect to the items put forward by Councillor Morgan, please?
I would make just a couple of comments if, and that way people can sort out to make sure they've got the right list. First off, I want to wish Councillor Hopkins good luck in vying for chair of the Large Urban Caucus of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. The committee was very supportive of you doing that, and you know, we'll certainly those traveling to AMO and will want to help, and I guess everybody want to help in any way they can. It would be great to have that as a position and you in that chair. I think that was the only thing I wanted to mention. Oh, and yeah, that was it. I just wanted to make sure that was highlighted. The other items that I would highlight would have been pulled, so.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions with those items on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Turn your attention to the screen, please.
Councillor Hopkins? Closing the vote, the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Morgan.
I'm happy to put 2.1 on the floor. This is about the 2018 municipal election report from our clerk's office. I believe Councillor Turner wanted that voted on separately.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. So first I want to start by saying this is with respect to the municipal election and the report from the clerks. I believe so. Am I correct? Okay. Fantastic job. And I was very impressed with how well the ranked choice voting went. My questions I identified through here is there was about 66,000 errors or corrections that needed to be made to the voters list as a result of MPAC inaccuracies. That equates to about 25% of the entire electorate. That's a massive amount of changes that have to be made. One of the things that I think many of us noticed while we went through the campaign was knocking on doors, especially in apartment buildings. That's where the significant challenges lied in terms of maintaining accuracy. That creates a fair obstacle or barrier to participation in elections, and that creates a very clear economic disparity in access to voting. Those who rent may often have a lower income threshold and may be required to rent. If there's barriers to participation in the electoral process, then there also becomes barriers to participation in civic government and access to civic government as that goes forward, because the representatives may or may not best represent the issues and views of those who rent housing. So in this, it talks about measures that will be taken to try and improve the accuracy of those lists. But I was wondering if there's measures that we can take as a council to try and improve that at the provincial level, where the lists that are provided to us have more accuracy. There's often debate, and I think at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, there's been discussion about why we don't have access to the federal or provincial voter lists and why MPAC. Certainly the answer to that is that that participation in municipal government tends to be based on property ownership rather than citizenship. However, it seems easier to correct against the federal and provincial lists rather than correct against the property rolls. So are there measures that we can take through your worship, perhaps to the clerk or to the chair, that we can take to try and improve it at the provincial level, whether that's been lobbying through our arms through AMO, whether that's direct consultation through the minister, or collaboration with other municipalities?
Yes, and I think it'll be appropriate for the clerk to answer. I'll note in her report, she does outline a number of measures that other municipalities have started to take to, because this is obviously a problem that is not just a London issue, it's an Ontario-wide issue, as you've noted. I would look to the clerk to comment on the work that she did in investigating what other municipalities are doing and what we could potentially do here, given their actions as well.
Clerk?
Through Mr. Mayor, the Clerks Association continues to lobby every single year to the province. The voters list is probably one of our major challenges and a significant workload for our staff who have to carry out the changes as well. I would be grateful if we reached out to AMO to see if there is something they could do to lobby the province for the change. The Association of Clerks and Treasurers and Managers has created a panel to reach out to the province. I am a member of that panel. So we will continue to work towards that. Again, as you've indicated, it's the tenants that suffer the most because the information is out of date. We had buildings that were rental units that were converted to condominiums, and all the information about those people was erased from the list. So it is a significant issue, and we're hoping the province will do something to change it for the next election.
Councillor Turner?
Okay, thank you very much. So I don't have a motion to craft on the floor right now, but perhaps it might make sense to bring a motion through the committee at a later date to see what avenues we could explore. And I'd be quite open to hearing any advice on what avenues we might be able to pursue to improve access to electoral systems in London. And throughout the province. The second, with respect to access, is a bit more in our control, and that's with respect to voting locations and poll locations. In several instances, there were large buildings of people that had to travel fairly significant distances to get to poll locations. In often cases, the only options available to them were to drive. And since many of them didn't have access to vehicles, they just didn't participate in the election. Do we have a minimum standard for the maximum distance from a residence to a polling location in London? Through you, Your Worship.
Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we don't. There is a balance act that we have to do when we pick our polling locations. We try to distribute by population, by how many electors, and try to centralize a poll within that area, but we have to rely generally on public buildings because we also have to make sure they're accessible to people with disabilities. We try to have them on bus routes so that people can take transit if they don't have cars. But every election, we receive a number of concerns and complaints and things that we look at. And we did hear concerns with some of the locations, and we will certainly consider those when we're looking at a polling location. But it's a struggle for us because we're limited as to the type of buildings that we can use for poll locations and try to balance everything else.
Other questions?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to the clerk as well, through you. I think that's helpful. I think also the number of locations ends up being a question of staff and resources too, to be able to execute that. If there's ways to increase that in consideration, because I think that would be a valuable investment in our electoral system to be able to improve access, if that means having more polling locations to be able to achieve that. And on the last note, I think there's a report on the signs and the sign bylaw. I think we saw a moderate improvement in the signs. Moderate, but that was helpful, and it's something to continue to pursue to make as best as we can. So I thank the clerk for the report, and I think that was quite helpful.
Councillor Pelosi.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just in reflection, as Councillor Turner was speaking in regards to accessibility of our polling locations and recognizing we're trying to accommodate as many people economically as possible in accessible buildings. Certainly my ward, I had some questions raised when their voting cards arrived, but they had to go out of the ward boundaries to vote, and some voters were confused of, so do I get to vote for you? Is it whoever's signs are over there? And it was clarity, and if it is possible to keep that in consideration going forward.
So noted, clerk. Do you wish to comment further?
Through Mr. Mayor, again, it's the balancing act. Sometimes people will call and say, but it's just right across the street. Why do I need to? It's because you have to create a circle around a population, and sometimes somebody ultimately will have something across the street and have to go to a polling location. That's a balance, but we certainly consider that, and we'll continue to consider that moving forward.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will be picking up, I guess, on the comments from Councillor Pelosi and Councillor Turner. Certainly in my ward, I had people who, as the clerk just indicated, had a polling station in their polling division or designated for their polling division that was in a different division, and yet one in a neighboring division would have been closer for them. So I just wonder if any consideration has been given to something similar to what we do with advanced voting, however, allowing constituents in the ward to vote in any of the ward's polling locations, not necessarily citywide, but if it was within the ward, it might improve accessibility there. So I don't know if the clerk has any immediate thoughts on that, but it's something I hope we can consider for the future.
Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Absolutely. We were going to try that this time around until we had a ranked ballot vote. So we had to focus our energies somewhere else, but that, certainly a vote anywhere within the ward is something that we were seriously considering for 2018.
Any other comments or questions with respect to this? Oh, Councillor Kayabaka.
I also agree with my colleagues. I just want to add, I don't want to direct this on, but I just want to add one last comment. Something that wasn't mentioned was some people who were able to, regarding to the renters who weren't able to register in time or get the proper information in time, but made it to a polling station, which was the message that we were giving out to people, is just make it and then you can bring your ID and you're able to register and vote. But then they were told that they had to go to another polling station to be able to vote, which then made it not very accessible for people to vote. And so if people are able to find a polling station that's closer to them, and they, even if it's an error through, whether it's through paperwork or whatever that's been done, if they're already at a polling station, I think they should be able to vote at that polling station and not be turned back. So there's a lot of turning back of people are telling them to go to a farther polling station, which kind of dragged it, and yeah, so I got calls on that, so yeah.
Thank you. I know the clerk takes that under advice. There's a motion on the floor. Are there any other, by Councillor Morgan, any other comments or questions? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to our clerk as well. I'm very pleased with how things went. I was looking at the budget and noticed the things that put us over were a little more consultation. However, clearly the very vast majority of people understood how this worked, and so that's great. And so I might ask how you think that might go next time in terms of consultation in the budget. And also, we were required to pay for an audit because it's not something the province was doing. And then do we anticipate that expense might disappear in the future in the next election, because perhaps other communities will want to follow your stellar example and try out the ranked balloting?
To the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we will be able to save money on the next election if we're continuing with the ranked ballots, because we can reuse the material and the communications plan that we established for this election will enhance it further, of course, but we have a good base that we can now use. With respect to the auditor, it was very important that we have a third party reviewing our practices, just because we had never done it before and the province was not willing to assist with that. Again, there'll be cost savings the next time, because I would still recommend we have an audit, but it would be less extensive, because we wouldn't need them helping us with the testing. I would still recommend they be there on voting day just to observe our processes, but we wouldn't need them to the level that we needed them this time.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps you just remind us if there's a decision to be made about rank balloting in the future, or this is our plan ongoing.
Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we remain with a ranked ballot election unless council decides to do something other than that. We will continue with the ranked ballot process.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and congratulations, London.
Well, thank you. Any other comments for the clerk? I suspect, following in the line of Councillor Van Holst's comments, there are at least 15 people who liked how things turned out. There is a motion on the floor moved by Councillor Morgan. Seeing no other questions, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Mr. Mayor, just as we vote, I just wanted to make a comment on this report. Councillor Van Holst brings up an important point, and certainly I don't want this to overshadow that I do believe the clerks have done a great job, but the province not being willing to support us in either financially or through certification did cause a significant portion of the increased costs, and it should be made clear that we asked them we asked for their support, because other municipalities will reap the benefits of London having gone through an election with a third party, reviewing the process, procedures. The vendor who produced this is likely to be in a great position to also sell their product, because they've gone through a election that was audited by a third party. And so there were great advantages to others outside of London. So it was unfortunate that the province didn't recognize that when you lead, there are additional costs, and that they were unwilling to even assist in a token way with the level of their budget with some of these costs to allow us to do what we wanted to do. So I don't, I know people talk about cost of an election. People should know that there are benefits to other municipalities, and we bore the cost of that, and the province wasn't willing to assist us on that.
Thank you. Noted as a very significant issue. Colleagues, I'll now turn your attention to the screen, please.
Councillor Lehman.
Councillor Lehman?
I'm not getting anything on my screen, so I'll just vote visually. Yeah.
To receive, so noted.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Thank you. As I turn this back to Councillor Morgan, you've heard colleagues comment about the clerk and her team. I want to add compliments. I think all of us have felt that a superb job done by the clerk and her team, and I know we all feel that way. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, the next. Oh yes, and they're in the audience. Thanks to them. And the next item is the 2.3, which is item 12 on our committee, item 12 on the council agenda, 2.3 in the committee report, the integrity commissioner item, and I believe that was also Councillor Turner who asked for that to be voted on separately.
Comments with respect to this? Seeing none. Any wrap on that, Councillor Morgan?
No, I have nothing to add.
Then, as we vote, I'll turn your attention to the screen, please.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14-1.
Councillor Morgan.
Item 13 on the council agenda, 2.4 in the committee report, the lobbyist registry and closed meeting investigator. Councillor Helmer wanted to vote it on separately. Councillor Hopkins was looking for a comment.
Comments or questions? Councillor, so moved by Councillor Morgan. Councillor Hopkins, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just before I do make a comment, I want to thank the committee for supporting me moving forward, hopefully chairing the Large Urban Caucus at AMO. Thank you for your support. If I am successful, representing the City of London will give us an opportunity to be on the executive committee as well as on the MOU as well, working with the province. And I just want to also acknowledge staff, City Hall support that I have to be able to do this as well. It's a really good team effort that we have. My comments at 2.4, I brought this forward back when the previous council came in, so we're looking at 214, and at that time, I thought it was important that we look at a lobbyist registry. I know we're talking about the closed meeting investigator. We are just receiving staff's report, not recommending to move forward with a lobbyist registry, and I want to thank them for the work that they did. At that time, we did not have an integrity commissioner. So I'm glad that we now have an integrity commissioner, we have an ombudsman. 2.2, we are making changes, approving bylaws to our code of conduct as well. So those changes, I acknowledge, hopefully will help us, I guess, be as transparent and get the information that we need to be transparent as a council. So I just wanted to make those comments.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call the question. Turn your attention to the screen, please.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-2.
Councillor Morgan.
Item 14 on the council agenda, item 2.6 in the committee report, advisory committee review, interim report. I thought I saw a couple of people ask for that to be pulled. I apologize, Mr. Mayor, I missed who it was.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Plaza.
Thank you to the chair, and thank you for the work that's done into this interim report, and certainly rising to recognize the work that all our committees do in serving the city. And the clerk has wording for amendment I'd like to bring forward to add an item C and D to this. There was an attached communication on March 15th enhancing the effectiveness of advisory committees, executive summary from Mr. Foster, who's chair of TAC, just for it to be referred for consideration during the review of the advisory committee review process. Section D would be that civic administration be requested to meet with the chairs of the advisory committees to gain their insight and feedback as part of the advisory committee review process. Just hoping that this, recognizing we've had some issues in the past with our advisory committees not being heard, undervalued, and that they're just making work for themselves, that hopefully engaging them more in the review process, having their insights would help us have more clarity and transparency as we move forward.
Thank you. Is there a seconder to the amendment? Councillor Squires. Any comments or questions? Councillor Squires.
I want to thank you very much, Councillor, for bringing this forward and recognizing the work that Mr. Foster has done. I had an opportunity to meet with him. He's very interested, as I think all are, in improving that committee process. And I think too often the reports of our committees are just coming to us, being quickly, received and filed, and we move on to the next thing. And that's not satisfying for them at all. On the other hand, it's not satisfying for us when we feel we're at odds with our advisory committees. And so those are things that I think we're going to have to work on, but I think there are things we can work on. And having watched some of the advisory committees work, they do very specialized and important work that is really supportive of us. So thank you very much for bringing this forward. Please to second it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, this is for the amendment. Councillor Van Holst? Okay, thank you. Then we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14-1.
Thank you. Now we have the motion as amended. So moved. Any comments or questions? We need a mover and a seconder, those who have more wisdom than Edwin has. So will you move that, Councillor Morgan? Seconded by Councillor Lewis. Comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14-1.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan.
The next item is item 16 in the council agenda, 4.1 in the committee report, the London Downtown Business Improvement Area 2019 proposed budget special municipal levy. This was an item that a committee failed to come to a consensus decision on. It was a 3-3 vote. So it basically comes to council with no decision from the committee. And your worship, I'm prepared to move a motion that would approve their budget with an added provision. And I know I have a seconder, I had a couple seconders, and Councillor Kayabaga and a couple other people offered to second. I think Councillor Squire was interested. You guys can race for it. So I'd like to introduce that motion, your worship, if that's appropriate.
Moved by Councillor Morgan, seconded by Councillor Kayabaga, I believe. Yes, thank you very much. Comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Councillor Squire.
I'm really pleased that this matter is resolved, but I spoke at the committee, and so I also want to speak tonight. And, you know, in looking at what's been going on, I think that what's going on is communications issue and also some technical issues, quite frankly, that have led to us not being able to appoint a board and not being able to approve a budget. One of the things that I think is important going forward is that we stop any kind of process where people are attacking each other in any kind of way outside of the parameters of issues that are proper to raise. And I think everybody should recognize that, and that's something that needs to stop. And I think that's important for staff, particularly whether it's the staff of the city or any organization. When we're counselors, I think what we should be doing is meeting with board members and talking to board members, because we are on that same governance level. But it is not our responsibility to delve into the inner workings or gripes or conflicts that exist in any organization. They exist here, they exist in any particular area. So I actually think that the steps that the Downtown Business Association took after the meeting probably technically satisfied their requirements with regard to the budget, in that they did have a discussion about the budget, which was their requirement. But I'm glad that there's the additional piece that is in place. But I think the key thing for me moving forward is that I had a meeting with the chair of the board last week. It was the kind of meeting that you should be having in this governance structure, and just talking about the issues that are relevant to the city's role in regard to association. So I want to commend him for taking the time to meet with me. On the other hand, I think staff should meet with staff. I feel strongly about that. I feel that staff lobbying politically elected people is not a good idea. I'll just say that. I think if I'm speaking to someone at the Downtown Business Association about their affairs, I will be speaking to a board member. I will not be delving further than that. And I hope the Downtown Business Association does the same thing. And I do want to recognize the staff that they have, who I'm sure have not been thrilled at this, but I know do a good job every day. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Squire. I think it's appropriate as well that we turn this back to our chair, Councillor Morgan, just for some clarity around some issues, please.
Yes, well, I did want to introduce the motion, although it's always nice to hear Councillor Squire speak, because I want people to understand what the motion actually says and the rationale for it, and I think that will help preface the debate. So, and for those at home who can't see the motion, they probably want to know what it says. So the motion has a series of items in it, but basically what it is it activates and authorizes the Downtown London Business Association's budget, as was contemplated in the original staff report. There is an added provision, a section F, to the motion that says the London Downtown Business Association be requested to report back to a future meeting of the Corporate Services Committee with respect to the outcome of the governance review being undertaken and the results of any subsequent membership review of the 2019 budget. And that's an important piece, because part of the debate that the committee had was this concern that the membership had actually voted down the budget. Whether or not they had to approve the budget is one matter, but it was actually voted down, and a number of councillors had concerns about that. At the committee, there was a number of options discussed and proposed, and I will tell you from the advice of our staff, we have great limitations in being able to either not approve their budget or approve their budget with provisos or conditions associated with it. Not approving their budget would have significant issues for us to be able to produce the tax bills on time with the allocations for the BIA associated with those. Attaching conditions was not functional as well, based on the advice that the committee got, as well as I investigated with some discussions with staff as well. It is very difficult to assign specific conditions once we have authorized the full budget because of the legally the way we have to do it. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take my advice on that, but I sought out some questions from our staff. So, and I will say in my consultations on this, I spoke with people who stood and presented to the meeting who were upset about the conditions here and others who have received emails from. And I could tell you, many of them did not know that we didn't have the option to kind of just approve part of their budget or hold it back or do other things. Basically, there are very significant consequences to not producing a full amount of the full budget on the tax rolls on time for them to be sent out. So the only thing we really can do is try to connect back with the Downtown London Business Association, ask them to come back to the committee, explain what happened in their governance process, because we also deferred the appointment of their board, and come back and talk about any subsequent discussions or votes, if they have them, on their 2019 budget. That would give us an opportunity to ask questions and satisfy any concerns that council has, and an opportunity for us to kind of close the loop on the discussion and allow the governance discussions and other discussions that the BIA needs to have to exist outside of the realm of these chambers. So it's not an ideal solution. Not everyone will be happy with this, but it is the functional solution that we are faced with given the restrictions that we have before us.
Thank you for that, that explanation. Councillor Lewis, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just wanted to rise and first of all, thank Councillor Morgan for the work he has done on this. I also want to thank the LDBA staff and members who I know over the last couple of days have done some outreach to their members, provided more information to them on the budget. That was a really important thing for me. If there's any ever doubt that I certainly support the downtown businesses, and particularly while Dundas Place is going under its second phase of construction. Certainly the members up in the gallery tonight are welcome to join me at Heroes Comics tonight for the release of Detective Comics issue number 1000, because I will be there patronizing our downtown businesses tonight. I know that we will all continue to support them through the construction phase, but this to me, and I spoke against the budget at committee, but where we are now and the work that's been done in the last week or so allows me to be supportive of this tonight. So I thank everyone involved for the work that they've put into it.
Thank you. I appreciate you're an optimist. I hope that they keep later hours. Councillor Kayabaga, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I also just wanted to, based on, the downtown report that we had, I want to congratulate the board for the work that they've been doing, and also want to congratulate my colleagues as well who have had time to change their minds and to the way that they responded to the questions that the council had and the concerns that different members here on council had. And one of the biggest things I have to say was quite an initiation for me into council as a councillor in my role. There was a lot of things that were said at the committee meeting, and there's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of things that we couldn't really understand where the issues were coming from. And one of the things that I had said was that I didn't want to be part of this side or that side. As a councillor, it's not my job to resolve membership issues. I think the board should do that. But I was really pushing on supporting the budget, and I think that there was a misunderstanding that my comments were not, that I didn't want to hear from my constituents, and I just want to correct that. That's not true. I just didn't want to get in between problems that the membership, the board is having with the membership, and I'm happy to see that they've taken the advice that we gave them on council, and they're moving forward, and they're going to continue to do the great work that they've been doing, and I'm super happy to see where this is going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Mayor. Clearly, business is very important to any city, and of course, it's no different for the City of London. So with business being that important to how we function and how we grow, it's even more important that their association function in a healthy manner and a manner in which all members feel appreciated and feel like they're contributing as a unified force. So I think this is a very good step in the right direction, and I look forward to supporting this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, there is a motion on the floor. I will turn your attention to the screen. as we call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14-0.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
That's it for that committee report.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. The fifth report of the Civic Works Committee, always delighted to hear from Councillor Squire.
Yes, my colleagues have created a tradition of speaking about the particular issue. So I've had a 4-hour presentation prepared on the history of London's rapid transit initiative from the point of view of Phil Squire, if anyone is interested, but I think we'd rather pass, wouldn't we, Mr. Mayor?
I think that's appropriate.
All right. So on the fifth report, I haven't been asked for to pull any items. So I would just put unless I'm hearing something, I'll post the entire report. Or
any items?
Move the entire report, sorry.
Thank you. Any items wish to be withdrawn?
Councillor Van Holst.
Councillor Van Holst?
I'd just like to make a comment after we vote.
So noted. Seeing nothing to be withdrawn, any comments or questions for Councillor Squire or staff? I'm sensing a record here.
Yeah.
Seeing none, then I will turn your attention to the screen. Oh. I didn't see a hand, but that's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Got the mic.
Thank you, Councillor Squire. Just quickly, as a point of order, a member may speak to an item that's on the floor, but if there's no item on the floor, then there's nothing to speak to. So if Councillor Van Holst is looking to speak to something, he should be doing it now, not after the vote.
That's a thoughtful point of order. Councillor Van Holst, do you wish to make a comment now? Or forever not?
Okay, well, then in that case, I'll attempt to be in order and make a comment on item number 17, the proposed bylaw on wastewater.
Yeah, we'll get there, but I think
okay, yeah,
we'll just
so,
defer
all
that
right,
a little
so,
bit for now, if we could, please. Thank you. Any other comments and or questions from colleagues? Then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote. Yeah, you were. Actually, you were.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Put these. No. Thank you. It is now. Councillor Cassidy fooled me. She turned it on for me. She also votes for me periodically. I have to watch her.
I wish.
I haven't heard from anyone, so I'm going to put the whole report on the floor unless I hear otherwise.
So noted. Are there any items that anyone wishes to withdraw or comment upon? Well, we'll leave you for the comments first. Any items to be noted specifically? Seeing none, then Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. So I wanted to comment on the item number 17. So it was, and I don't know if council recalls, but about 4 years ago, I requested that we remove the restriction for watering lawns on days that match your house number. So if the day of the month is even, you had to water a lawn during the summer on if your house number was even. And basically for all the reasons that are in the report here, it's simply there was a need for that at one time, but now our infrastructure is in such a state that prescription is no longer needed. So I just wanted to say thanks for that. It gives people just a little more flexibility, a little less complicated life. I know for somebody who, like me, is busy, it's enough for me to remember that my wife wants me to water the lawn. I don't also have to remember what day it is and where I live. So thank you.
Thank you. I noted that your colleagues to your left are standing in support of your comments. That's great. Any other comments or questions for Councillor Squire or staff? Seeing none, I will turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Squire, well done,
Thank you.
and I mean it.
You mean that generally or specifically?
No, this time I mean it. Number 9, under added reports, the 8th report of the Strategic Priorities and Planning Committee from March the 20th. May I call on Councillor Helmer, please?
Thank you. This is the report from the public participation meeting that we had at Centennial Hall. You'll see the recommendation is to receive the presentation and the submissions. I'll put that on the floor. 1, 2.
Any comments or questions with respect to receiving this report? Seeing none, then I will call the question as we turn to the screen.
Councillor Squire?
I can vote manually, yeah.
Councillor Squire votes yea.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0. It may show 14. I clicked too fast, so it's in my notes.
So noted, thank you. We now turn your attention to the 9th report of this SPPC meeting. Councillor Helmer, can I call on you again, please? That's not what I have on here.
You can do that.
I can do the report if you want.
Councillor Morgan, why don't you do a report if you want?
Sure. I'm happy to do another one. I got the 8th report of the Corporate Services Committee, which was our meeting yesterday. We met on 2 items, 2.1, 2.2, the debenture issuance, another very successful issuance of debentures at a very great rate, and then a court security and prisoner transfer program agreement. Basically an agreement that when we sign it, we get money from the province. If we don't, we pay the money. I'm happy to move both of those together. I don't know if there are questions about it. I'd be happy to talk at length on the debenture issuance. I think it was very interesting, and there's really good things. And I will say, as I present that, excellent work by our finance team. They execute the fiscal plan of the corporation, and that leads to things like debt issuances that are filled very quickly at very competitive interest rates that were described as some of the best they've seen from comparative municipalities, and actually less than by about 3.32% or basis points, as they call them, than we got last time. So although we thought the interest rates would be going up, we actually got a slightly better rate than before, which will save us a couple of $1 million in interest payments over the course of the term. So great work by our staff on executing a very strong fiscal plan and a good issuance on that.
So noted, thank you. Any comments or questions for Councillor Morgan or staff? Seeing none, I will call the question and turn your attention to the screen.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Helmer, back to you.
Thank you. I will put the 9th report of SPPC on the floor. Under 4.1, I would suspect we're going to separate out 4.12. This is project number 2, Wellington Road Gateway, as Councillor Turner has declared a pecuniary interest in that matter. There were some divided votes about the remainders of the projects. I don't know if anyone wants to pull those separately now, if you do indicate to me that you'd like to.
I'll look at the pleasure of council if they wish to deal with those items separately. Otherwise, we'll vote at those as one, with the exception of what has been noted. Councillor Van Holst.
Yes, I would like the two of the other three legs to be separated as well. The other two legs to be separated as well. Pulled out.
So those would be, again, let's just clarify.
So
Councillor
why don't we start off the top and we'll put project number 1, the downtown loop, on the floor.
So we have the downtown loop, the Wellington Gateway, and the East London Link. Anything else, colleagues? See none? I'll turn your attention to the first project and ask for any comments or questions from colleagues with respect to Project 1, the downtown loop. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I voted against a number of projects yesterday, and we'll do the same again today. My concern is that we haven't really set ourselves up to move into the future. I think that there's a new disruptive technology on the way. Of course, it's autonomous microtransit, which will be much less expensive than the projects we're doing, and will also provide a much greater service than these. I think we face a future that's provides a better investment than this. And so for those reasons, I'll vote against this. Thank you.
Any other comments or question then? With apologies, Councilor, what we could have done is done the consent on the balance, but if, with your indulgence, we'll do those after as one package after we've dealt with that. So to be clear, we, with no other discussion, well, I'll turn your attention to the vote in just a moment, but if you vote yes, if you're voting yes, you are voting to support the committee's recommendation last night. If you're voting no, you are not accepting the committee's recommendation last night to proceed with the downtown loop. As I turn your attention to the screen, please.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 10-5.
Councillor Hummer.
I'll put project number 2. This is the Burlington Road Gateway. Councillor Turner has declared a pecuniary interest on this one.
So noted. Comments or questions from colleagues? Seeing none, as I said earlier, just to be clear, if you vote yes, you're supporting the committee's recommendation from last night. No, meaning otherwise. I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote, please.
I close the vote. Yes. Okay, I'm going to close on the vote. It's approved 11-4.
I'd like to move Reconsideration.
Is there a seconder for reconsideration? Councillor Cassidy. Turn your attention to the screen as we vote for that.
I haven't closed it yet. Councillor Lewis. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-1 with one recuse.
Thank you. Thank you. Now that was for reconsideration of the vote so that we now can vote on this, Councillor.
Project number 2, Wellington Road Gateway on the floor. This is the one that Councillor Turner has declared a pecuniary interest on.
Councillor Turner, are you listening? So again, if you vote yes, you are supporting the committee's recommendation last night. If you are voting no, you are not. Stephen, are we good?
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 10-4 with one recuse.
Councillor Elmer.
I'll put project number 3 and the associated B, 1, and 2 on the floor. This is the East London Link and the amendments that were brought forward by Councillor Lewis.
So noted. Any comments or I'm not sure that requires a seconder, Councillor Van Meerbergen, but let me just confirm. Oh, you have a question, please.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we can, as last night, do it separately? Like, in other words, Councillor Lewis's amendments separately from the main motion?
We certainly can separate it. Last night we voted on the amendment. Once it was amended, then we voted on the whole thing. So, sure.
Councillor Van Meerbergen?
Just to clarify, so there'd be an amendment vote first and then as amended?
Councillor Helmer, please.
Thank you. I'm just going to put 3 on the floor. You may be putting Councillor Lewis in a bit of an awkward situation, but I'll put 3 on the floor, and then we can deal with the amendments that passed last night when we debated them last night on the floor.
So if there are are there any other questions with respect to what we're doing here? This is now item 3 on a standalone basis, the East London Link. So again, colleagues, we are voting on item 3, the East London Link only. I will turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 11-4.
Councillor Helmer.
Okay, now I'll put on the related amendments. This is the B, 1 and 2 additional actions being taken respect to the East London link. This is the thanking the London Transit Commission and then requesting them to consider a number of things as priorities.
Comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen, please.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
And I believe the balance of those items you were looking at, none were asked to be voted on separately. Councillor Helmer, can you clarify, please?
Well, I've learned to stop trying my luck. I'm going to try 6, 7, 9, and 12 altogether. I believe the voting on those was all the same. So I'll try that. There was some differences in the other 3, so maybe we'll do those one at a time.
Can you just clarify for the benefit 6, 7, 9, and 12, please?
So 6 is intelligent traffic signals, 7 is the expansion buses, 9 is the bus stop amenities, 12 is the Adelaide Street underpass active transportation connections.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Van Meerbergen?
I'm just wondering if it might be prudent just to add project 16 into there as well, or do that separately?
Sure, why don't we add it in? I mean, talking about it every time seems to be taking about the same amount of time as voting on it, but.
So noted, including item 16. Colleagues, any other questions? Then we'll call the question, turn your attention to the screen.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. If I recall correctly, we did vote on 14 and 15 together, so I'm going to put those on the floor together. This is the Dundas Place Thames Valley Parkway Active Transportation Connection, which is 14, and the Dundas Street Old East Village Streetscape Improvements, which is 15.
Comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen, please.
Councillor Hopkins. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14-1.
Councillor Helmer.
I will put on Clause C, this is consideration of the following remaining proposed projects being referred. That's Project 8, onboard information screens, Project 10, the pedestrian street connectivity improvements, 11, new sidewalks, 13, active transportation improvement across transit bridges, cycling routes connecting to downtown transit, cycling routes connecting to transit throughout the city, and enhanced bike parking, as well as D, which is to receive the report and the communications, and also the attached presentation.
And colleagues, to be clear, what this is recommending is consideration that these projects be referred to a future meeting. Any comments or questions? Councillor Squire.
Thank you very much. I don't know if this is an appropriate time to raise this, but I did want to raise it before I was finished. I think with decision to vote no on something also comes a huge obligation to find an alternative or find something that you think works better. And having heard from constituents all day, I think it's important that I at least recognize or try to find a path forward. So I wanted to ask staff through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could. There are two routes that we didn't approve. But we all recognize that we want better transit in those areas and better transportation. Is that something that I should be bringing up at the Civic Works Committee, or is staff going to be looking at those issues and trying to come forward with something that works in those areas? Because I think leaving people with the impression that we just don't want to help in those areas or do something in those areas is certainly, from my point of view, the wrong message. And I certainly have to recognize what my colleague to the right has in her area, which is a rapidly developing area that needs transit and needs a route to get to other areas of the city, and similarly in West London. So, Mr. Mathers, you did such a great job yesterday. I'm wondering if you can help me with that on that issue. You don't want me to raise this now?
Councillor Helmer first, please.
Oh, sorry.
I don't have an opinion on it, partly because you're raising something I have a pecuniary interest on. And so if we're going to deal with that, I'd like someone else to move this motion. I can get out of the discussion.
I think we have a specific...
It's not a motion, but I apologize. I hadn't considered that when I spoke.
So noted. We have a motion on the floor. Mr. Mathers, would you care to comment?
It's just a question, Mr. Mayor. It's not a motion. I just want to know the path forward.
Thank you, but let me come back first. Council, I'll ask you to sit for a second, please. Councillor Morgan, you had something you wanted to say?
Well, I don't mind the councillor getting his answer. My comment is going to be related but separate.
Mr. Mathers?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Through your worship, of course, the next phase is to really look at what we're going to do with those other routes, and any kind of direction that council would like to provide us at this time would be helpful. Without that direction, we would expect to come forward with some planning and some information how we're going to move forward in this area, especially with the north and the west. But if council wants to provide some more specific direction, we'd be happy to take that as well.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions to the motion on the floor?
And if my colleagues don't want me to do this tonight, that's fine. But to finish off, I would like a motion just to direct staff to look at alternative planning in terms of transit routes for the north and the west route. Just in a general way, I think that will be sufficient for their purposes. I know that I'm doing this verbally, but it's something that I think is important for the whole council to move forward on. So if I have a seconder, fine. If not, I'll bring it to the Civic Works Committee on the next occasion that I'm there.
Before we get there, there is a motion on the floor now dealing with the referral of these various items. I believe you said projects 8 through 19 with a few exceptions.
Mine would be an amendment to that.
All right.
Councillor Morgan wants to help me, which I'm always thrilled about, I think.
I'm almost shocked by that. Councillor Morgan, can you add some wisdom to this?
I want to comment in no way on any sort of alternative to the northern route, just so you know, but what I do want to outline is what we're actually approving here tonight and what we talked about yesterday, and that is that we were directing our staff to submit projects for funding. We were not necessarily voting for or against permanently any sort of specific routes. We're just choosing the ones that are going to move forward in the funding process. It does not in any way preclude any councillor in talking about transit improvements very similar to what was contemplated, just not exactly as was contemplated in the decisions yesterday. And again, I'm referring not to the northern route on this, I'm just referring generally to the decision-making we made. That is my understanding of what we have done. We have chosen a list of projects to forward for funding. We have not permanently done anything to the potential for projects along, I will say, the west route, for example.
Any other comments or questions with respect to the amendment? Councillor Elmer.
I need someone to take over the main motion. I have to not participate.
Councillor Morgan, you actually have a challenge with I believe, for a second. So we're in a situation where we don't have a seconder as yet, but do we have a seconder for Councillor Squire's amendment? Councillor Van Holst. And now I think we're looking for someone to take Councillor Helmer's place for this purpose. Councillor Cassidy, are you volunteering?
I will take Councillor Helmer's place, and when the time is appropriate, I would like to speak to the amendment.
At the appropriate time, you'll certainly be able to do that. Are there comments or questions with respect to the amendment? We'll actually let you do the wrap on this, Councillor Cassidy, as you wish. Councillor Morgan, there's some question?
I want to know if the amendment is divided into, like, I could certainly engage in a discussion on alternatives to the western route. I can't.
It was not presented as a split, no.
Okay, then I.
Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. I move this motion. Is it possible to split this amendment out for discussion outside of this? Because it's going to be difficult if we add this this is going to have to be split out anyway, so that Councillor Helmer might be able to vote on the rest of these items. So maybe look for some direction from the clerk.
Bring some wisdom, please, Mr. Squire.
I'm happy to withdraw it, just bring it at the Civic Works Committee. I'm happy to do that. I don't want to cause any delay or anything like that. I just feel an obligation to move forward with the work I have to do, and I'll do it at Civic Works. And I don't have to second.
Will the secretary agree?
Yes, I'm happy to agree with that, and I'll note that I'll also bring a motion there to look at some of the other options. We talked about HOVs, and reversible lanes. If those were put in, if we investigated those, we might be able to come up with a solution for these other routes.
Thank you. That's a seconder with a whole lot of comment, so thank you very much. Councillor Helmer, back to you. Thank you all.
Okay, so part C and D and the receipt of the presentation is on the floor.
Any other comments or questions that would add something new or helpful to this discussion? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote. Thank you.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-2.
Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I'll put 3.1 and 3.2 on the floor. The first is, of course, the public participation meeting on the development charges bylaw, which is a combination of extremely important and extremely technical and sometimes dry reading. So I draw everyone's attention to that. That's something we'll be dealing with again later this year as we head towards enacting a new development charges bylaw in August. 3.2, of course, is the referral of the discussion about the strategic priorities and the strategic plan to our next meeting about that. And I think in retrospect, that was a very good idea. I don't know if we would have wanted to get into the discussion last night after we wrapped up the other discussion. So I'll put 3.1 and 3.2 on the floor.
So noted. Any comments or questions with respect to the motion? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen, please.
Councillor Cassidy, Councillor Van Meerbergen. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Helmer.
That's it for that one.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. I'll now turn your attention to the 7th report of council in closed session. Councillor Morgan.
Well, my apologies in advance. This is the very long reading part of the meeting. I'm not as fast as Councillor Selly. 7th report of council in closed session. Your council in closed session reports. 1, offer to purchase industrial lands and option agreement for industrial lands. Dantor Construction Limited, part of Block 4, Plan 33M 544 Innovation Park Phase 1. That as a procedural matter subject to Section 239, subsection 6 of the Municipal Act 2001, the following recommendation be forwarded to Council in closed session for the purpose of considering whether a recommendation should be forwarded to Council for deliberation and vote in public session. That, on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Corporate Services and City Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer, and on the advice of the Manager of Realty Services with respect to the city-owned industrial land located at Innovation Park, Phase 1, part of Block 4, containing an area of approximately 5 acres located on the east side of Innovation Park and being comprised of part Block 4, Plan 33M-544 as outlined in the sketch hereto as Appendix B. The agreement of purchase of sale, the agreement, subject, submitted by Dancore Construction Limited, the purchaser, to purchase the subject property from the city at a purchase price of $350,000, reflecting a sale price of $70,000 per acre as Appendix C, be accepted, subject to the following. A, the purchaser be allowed 60 days from the date of the acceptance of this agreement to examine the title at the purchaser's own expense. B, the purchaser be allowed 60 days from the date of the acceptance of this agreement to carry out soil tests as they might reasonably require. C, the purchaser be allowed 60 days from the date of the acceptance of this agreement to conduct environmental inspections and investigations of the property. D, the purchaser satisfy itself within 60 days from the acceptance of this agreement of the geotechnical conditions of the property. E, the purchaser shall have 60 days from the acceptance of this agreement to finalize and secure a lease agreement with the purchaser's tenant satisfactory to the purchaser in its sole direction. F, the purchaser shall be granted a 5-year option to purchase for the remaining northern block of Part 4, Plan 33M 544, being approximately 7.1 acres, subject to survey, at the price of $70,000 per acre referenced in Schedule F of the agreement attached in Appendix C. G, the vendor agrees to prepare and deposit on title, on or before closing at its expense, a reference plan describing the property. H, the vendor shall have 90 days from the date of acceptance of this agreement to terminate the existing farm lease with the farm tenant, and the vendor agrees to provide the purchaser all documents within possession of the property, being surveys, reports, etc., within 5 days from the acceptance of this agreement. Number 2, offer to purchase industrial land, 1960946 Ontario Incorporated, Part 1, Plan 33R 16368, the Cuddy Industrial Lands. That as a procedural matter, pursuant to Section 239, subsection 6 of the Municipal Act 2001, the following recommendation be forwarded to Council in closed session for the purpose of considering whether the recommendation should be forwarded to Council for the deliberation and vote in public session. That, on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Corporate Services, City Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer, and on the advice of the Manager of Realty Services, with respect to the city-owned industrial land located on the east side of Cuddy Boulevard, being part of the Cuddy Industrial Lands containing an area of approximately 2.52 acres, being composed of Part 1, Plan 33R 16368, outlined on the sketch hereto as Appendix B. The offer submitted from Copia Developments under the corporate name 1960946 Ontario Incorporated, the purchaser, to purchase the subject property from the city at a purchase price of $201,600, reflecting a sale price of $80,000 per acre. Hereto as Appendix C be accepted, subject to the following conditions. A, the purchaser be allowed within 30 days of acceptance of the offer to examine the title at the purchaser's own expense. B, the purchaser be allowed within 30 days of acceptance of the offer to carry out soil tests it might be reasonably require. C, the purchaser be allowed within 30 days of the acceptance of the offer to conduct environmental inspections and investigations of the property satisfactory to the purchaser. The purchaser shall be allowed within 30 days from the acceptance of the offer to carry out geotechnical investigations of the property satisfactory to the purchaser. The purchaser be allowed within 30 days to determine the financial feasibility of the purchaser's intended use of the property satisfactory to the purchaser, and F, the purchaser acknowledges and accepts the property in an as-is condition. 3, property value protection agreement, 5435 White Oaks Road, W12A landfill site. That, as a procedural matter pursuant to Section 239, subsection 6 of the Municipal Act 2001, the following recommendation be forwarded to Council in closed session for the purpose of considering whether or not the recommendation should be forwarded to Council for deliberation and a vote in public session. That, on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Corporate Services and City Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer, on the advice of the Manager of Realty Services, with the concurrence of the Managing Director of Environmental and Engineering Services and City Engineer, and the Director of the Environment, Fleet, Waste, and Solid Waste, with respect to the property at 5435 White Oak Road, the W12A landfill property value protection plan agreement as Appendix B for 5435 White Oaks Road be approved.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Helmer, I sure miss Councillor Sally. No disrespect ever. Any comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen, please.
Councillor Cassidy, Councillor Squire, Councillor Van Meerberg, Councillor Turner.
Apologize for putting people to sleep.
It's painful, not your fault.
I manually say yes.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Morgan, thank you, and I mean it. Deferred matters, there are none. Inquiries, none that I'm aware of. I'm aware there may be an emergent motion. Councillor Cass.
Sorry, Your Worship, just on a point of order, I realize we only really have one item left on the agenda and then the bylaws, but we have reached our 6:30 dinner break, so I just want us to be aware of that. If we're going to continue, that may be the will of council, but we have reached that time.
Well, I think that's a very legitimate question. We can certainly break and come back and do this, but I'm at the pleasure. Is there an appetite, forgive that reference, to break for your appetite? I'm not seeing a pressing need, but for the short term, thank you, Councillor Lewis, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So under our procedure bylaw, I first have to ask for leave.
Yes. I understand that's the case, so there has to be to have leave. We're looking for someone to move and second. Councillor Van Holst, is there a seconder? Councillor Turner?
So the motion for leave is that pursuant to section 20.2 of the council procedure bylaw, leave be given to introduce an emergent motion regarding the London Medical Innovation and Commercialization Network.
Thank you. That is the emergent motion. Yeah, we've had that moved and seconded. Councillor Squire.
Yeah, I just want to remind council that an emergent motion can only be brought if it's the matter that we're hearing would result in irreparable harm or loss to the corporation. So that it's a very, very high standard. It's beyond urgency. There has to be proof of that. So I do want us to stick to our procedural bylaw. And so I think it's incumbent on the council to show what irreparable harm or loss the council would suffer. And I say this because it's similar to a court proceeding where before someone's going to make a decision without an accompanying report and information, it has to be at a very high level. And so that's the level we have to meet, and I just want to indicate that.
Just bear with us, colleagues, because there's a question about being able to debate. This is not a debatable item. So there is a motion on the floor. There's a motion on the floor, properly moved and seconded, as to whether we will accept the emergent motion. So I will put your attention to the screen. If you vote yes, that will survive, and we will hear the motion. If it does not, we will not. Your attention to the screen.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 11-3.
Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Your Worship. And the reason that I believe this is an emergent motion is because there's a certain sum of money, taxpayer money, and we do not know how much money is left at the London Medical Innovation and Commercialization Network. Our money was supposed to flow contingent upon money received from two other parties, namely FedDev, which never did approve the applications that it received, and so never did fund this network to the tune of $20 million. And also a partner, namely Western University, was supposed to have also funded $20 million. So city money was supposed to flow contingent upon those two funders. And with Western leaving the Medical Innovation and Commercialization Network, there is no chance now of their contribution. So with city money just sitting out there and hanging out there, I felt it necessary to get an accounting, find out what's going on, see if there's any chance of city money being returned, of taxpayer money being returned, and also a notification to the Medical Innovation and Commercialization Network that I would hope that they would not be granting further funds until this gets cleared up. And my motion is that civic administration be directed to immediately advise the governing council that London's intention to execute the city's right to secure repayment of our grant. And I believe I have a seconder in Councillor Turner.
Open for any questions? Your Worship.
Thanks very much. I'd like to move this motion be referred to staff pursuant to the return of our city manager who is away for the next couple of weeks, and an opportunity for us to be able to meet with the board of the London Medical Network. Colleagues, I'm very recently appointed to the London Medical Network in my role as mayor, and as you will note, the city manager has been involved in this since he was treasurer. The comment I would briefly make is that we have not yet had an opportunity since the withdrawal of Western's decision to withdraw to have the opportunity to have to speak with the London Medical Network at a board meeting. And I think it would show appropriate courtesy and also, frankly, I think good information back to council, who I think has a great need to know. In fact, I would suggest that that what we do is it may well even be appropriate to have the London Medical Network report to council through SPPC to give some to answer questions that we have. So I understand the urgency of this, but it would be my recommendation that we refer it until back to staff until such time as, and soon, until such time as our city manager returns. We've had an opportunity to have a meeting with the board of the London Medical Network, of which we are members, and better then advise through a future SPPC meeting that we then can, as full council, deal with this issue.
Can I get a seconder for that referral? Councillor Van Meerbergen. Open the floor for a debate on that referral. Councillor Squire.
First of all, I want to thank Councillor Cassidy for bringing the motion. I think it's important this matter be brought to us. The reason I was questioning about the whether it was an emergent notion, because I think the issue we should be considering in that regard is taxpayer city money in danger of somehow disappearing, going somewhere, being spent in the interim. So I think that's a very high threshold and a very important issue. I think the evaluation of the medical network should be done. Maybe an audit should be done. I don't know that, but I think the only thing I would want to do today is ensure that money's not going to go anywhere where it's not supposed to be. If the mayor can, and I know he can't guarantee it, but I just wonder if the mayor could indicate, has he received any assurance from the medical network that any money that is sitting there right now that came from the City of London will not move 1 inch in the period that the referral is happening? I will do the referral if that's the case, to get more information. But if we are in a situation where our money is somehow in jeopardy, that's a whole different issue. And that's what I think we should be talking about today. A lengthy discussion about what we think about the medical network, whether it's done a good job or anything like that. Without further information, I don't want to get into that. So if the mayor can give me the assurance that our money is safe, not in a safe, but safe, then I will support the referral.
Your Worship.
Thank you. I concur with Councillor Squire in terms of the intent and frankly the intent of Councillor Cassidy in this issue as well. I will give assurances to Council that the first thing that I do tomorrow is confirm, or actually even tonight confirm through to the CEO of the London Medical Network that no further monies associated with the city be expended in any way, and I will give that assurance, that undertaking.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Thank you, Councillor Cassidy, for bringing this forward with respect to Councillor Squire's comments about the urgency and the risk to the corporation. I think Councillor Cassidy laid out what her apprehensions of those risks were, and I think that's appropriate. I think there's two potential concerns with respect to those funds, though. One is funds that rest within the Innovation Network, and ones that rest within the corporation here. And so with a referral, I think it would be important to also ask that any disbursements planned from the corporation of the City of London to the network be suspended until such time as we investigate that.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you. I think it's really important that as stewards of the taxpayers' money that we pay attention to these funds. And given the recent announcements, I think it's even more incumbent that we pay attention to what's going on. And I appreciate, Your Worship, that you will be coming back with assurances, but I wonder if I could add a friendly amendment that we also get a report back. I think it is important. I know the delegation usually comes to us, for those of you who are new to council, with updates coming forward. But I think it is important that we receive a report prior to that to understand exactly what is going on, getting an update, and the implications as well of Western pulling out. So if I could add that as a friendly amendment to your assurances, Your Worship, with a report coming back to council, I'd appreciate it.
Councillor Helmer.
Thank you, and partly because Councillor Morgan mentioned this earlier, I'm just going to address why I'm even talking about the issue, because I have the same kind of employment relationship in some ways as Councillor Morgan. The agreement for the London Medical Innovation Network is between the City of London and the two hospital foundations. And the way I understand the agreement is, if we're going to recover the grant money that has been dispersed to be held by the hospital foundations, equally $5 million to each of them in trust, what we would be doing is getting it returned from the hospital foundation. So I don't think that the pecuniary interest is activated insofar as we're talking about the referral. I mean, I have to look at specific motions if we're getting into other things. I also want to emphasize that that's what the agreement says, is that the money will go to the hospital foundations, that it will be held in trust, and there are restrictions on how it can be dispersed. And you'll see in part 2 of the agreement, it says, not to be released to anyone in whole or in part without the consent in writing of the city treasurer and chief financial officer or designate. I mean, it says different words than that, but basically designate for that specific purpose. So there are quite tight controls on those monies that are held in trust by the hospital foundation. So I'm quite convinced that we can wait and have an appropriate report back from both the network and the city manager on the issue.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to support the referral because there have been a couple of times when we've passed an emergent motion and it's been perhaps hasty, where we might have done better to send it back to committee or got further information. So that's where I would be most comfortable. So I'll follow that. And I also appreciate Councillor Squire for his comments.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Councillor Cassidy, you may comment on the referral.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. So I would like to thank my colleagues for this discussion. I think it's an important discussion. I think we had to have it. The news was just, I think, on Thursday from Western University, so it certainly caught me off guard. I think if the original agreement is attached to the added council agenda, and I highly recommend that if anybody hasn't had a chance to look at it in detail, that they should do that. It's very clear. It's not very complicated. There are rules. The rules were, you know, what was contingent upon the city inputting $10 million, and those rules may or may not have been followed to the letter, and I'm concerned about that. We have had updates in the past that the updates were not clear. And we also were promised at the beginning, definitely, anywhere from 350 to 500 jobs. We have never had a clear accounting of what jobs were created. We've heard of maybe 50, but we have not seen those jobs. And in fact, some of those jobs were jobs that may have already existed somewhere as a member of the network. There was also concern about $900,000 in grants that Tech Alliance gave out on behalf of the Medical Innovation and Commercialization Network. And of those $900,000 in grants, some of that money was given to firms in Kitchener-Waterloo. This network was supposed to have a direct economic benefit to the City of London, providing funding to companies in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order. With regard to the referral, it's to provide, the mayor's given the referral, provided certain assurances. We're now getting into a more general debate about the medical network, whether it was doing a good job. And if the council wishes to go ahead, that's fine. But statements are being made that are fairly serious about matters. And I'm just saying, I think that would be better kept to a fulsome discussion when we actually have information from both the mayor and our city manager, who I understand goes to all the meetings. So I just think this is going a little bit too far, and none of us have a chance to reply because we don't have any information.
I would ask Councillor Cassidy to keep remarks to the referral, please.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Those were the end of my remarks. I chose to speak to my main motion, to the motion in its entirety, just to explain my concerns and why we need to do this. I'm happy with the referral. Councillor Squire mentioned an audit. I think that's an appropriate way to go down the road.
Your Worship, you have a chance to wrap up on your referral.
Thank you, colleagues. I think this is the most appropriate so that we can get fulsome information to all council members. I think it's been well pointed out that there is an ask and a need to have clear information from the London Medical Network. And and if this is supported, I appreciate the opportunity for us to come back to SPPC and have a dialogue and representation from LMN and have the kinds of questions answered that have been brought up today. So if colleagues support the referral, I'm grateful for that opportunity. I know that the city managers would appreciate the opportunity to respond at that time as well. Thank you.
We're going to now be calling the vote on the referral, not Councillor Cassidy's motion.
Councillor Cass.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Hopkins had asked for a friendly amendment to also have a staff report that council could see before we hear from the LMN.
I'm certainly comfortable with that as long as it is certainly before an LMN meeting, but with the city manager back here to be able to contribute to that, as I think he probably has the most institutional knowledge with respect to that. So I'm happy to support that. Colleagues, that may have to be rewritten slightly to confirm that the friendly portion of the amendment as suggested by Councillor Hopkins, or you can vote on this with my commitment to do as requested, but I respect we'll have to. If not, then we will presumably defeat this and or what would be, clerk, just confirm back, do we defeat this and then re-put? Can I just get some direction on that, please? So we can, the options are to shut the vote down and then rewrite it with that condition, but with the friendly amendment indicating that a report would be made available to staff subject to the return of the city manager. Or you can take this as it is, and Councillor Hopkins, can you guide us a bit here in your thoughts?
Yes, if I may, I made a friendly amendment to have staff report back with an update. And I think that's very important to have that report back. This amendment or this motion here doesn't really make sense if you read it through. We're talking about an announcement from Western University of their intent to withdraw from the London Medical Innovation. I'm not exactly sure what we're asking here. So if my colleagues would allow me to make a friendly amendment to this motion, or we could defeat this and we could start all over again. But I would suggest just putting a report back from Civic Administration with an update to Council, because like I said, a lot of my colleagues here probably would I think we need that update where we are, as well as the implications of Western pulling out.
The more things change, sometimes the more the things they stay the same. Councillor Helmer, you had some thoughts around this before. Can you just bring some clarity to a few words on this, or shall I try that one more time?
I'm in a very awkward position because I just abstained on this vote. The motion that actually came up had all kinds of comments about meeting with Western and talking about their withdrawal, and I have no comments about that.
So noting that the intention of the referral was to not deal with the emergent issue until such time, or not to deal with this until such time as we had more information, colleagues. By the way, do I need to be sitting somewhere else to make these comments?
Look at me.
I'm looking at you. You seem to be the purveyor of such wisdom on things.
That's guilt by reputation.
It is. All right, so what we're looking to do, colleagues, is this. We're looking to provide a report to council upon the return of the city manager. And in addition, and part of that as well will be to ask the LMN to come to a future SPPC meeting and be there subject to the questions that council has of it. I don't think it's much more complicated than that. We're not asking about, or suggesting tonight that there's going to be a withdrawal from LMN. We are not suggesting that that anything beyond what I've just indicated there. And if council is comfortable with that as a referral, that was certainly the intent, and we can rewrite that for the purpose of. It's up. Is it up?
Did you have it up?
That looks a lot more like what I said, or meant to say. Any comments or questions with respect to the wording of this motion? Colleagues, seeing none, then I will call the question.
Closing the vote, and the referral is carried 14-0.
Thank you, colleagues. We have bylaws now to approve. Originally, it was bylaws 106 through 139 inclusive, but we have pulled bylaw 136, the bylaw relating to the LDBA. So I will look for a mover and a seconder for the first reading of bylaws 106 to 135, 137 to 139. Is there a mover? Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Lehman. I'll call the vote. Sorry, that got messier than it should have been. I apologize.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14-0.
Colleagues, I'll ask for a mover and seconder for the second reading of Bills 106 through 135, 137 through 139, moved by Councillor Sally, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Any discussion on second reading? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 14-0.
Colleagues, on third reading, I'll ask for a mover and seconder of third reading and enactment of Bills 106 through 135, 137 through 139. Councillor Kayabaga, seconded by Councillor Pelosa. I will call the vote. Attention to the screen, please.
Councillor Squire? Closing the vote and the motion carries 15-0.
Colleagues, I will call for mover and seconder for the introduction and first reading of Bill 136, moved by Councillor Kayabaga, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14 with 1 abstain.
I will look for a mover and seconder for second reading of Bill 136, moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Pelosa. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Attention to the screen, please.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14 with 1 recused.
Colleagues, I'm looking for a mover and seconder for third reading and enactment of Bill 136. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Hillier. I'll call the vote. Turn your attention to the screen, please.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 14 with 1 recused.
Thank you, colleagues. Before we call for adjournment, again, I'd like to thank staff. I think there's been a lot of things that have been dealt with this evening, last evening, and throughout this past week, and we're certainly grateful for your wisdom and your help on this. We appreciate it. I will look for a mover to adjourn. Councillor Sally, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. That will be a hand vote. All those in favor? Colleagues, meeting adjourned.